So recently, there's been a lot of discourse around Tidal Wave, Boobawamba, and Nullscapes. On Twitter, it's mostly just people insulting them, but it's pretty much always people insulting things on Twitter, so that's not anything new. But there's also a lot of talk about why Boobawamba and Nullscapes have gotten no victors so far. At the same time, a lot of people are talking about how Tidal Wave has gotten no victors in over a year now, which I think has never happened in the history of the list for a top one. So I thought it would be interesting to dig into it and see the difference between Tidal Wave and the previous top ones, to see if maybe Tidal Wave is a new era of difficulty and we're finally getting top ones that are truly just not doable. So to measure all this, I made graphs of the victor progressions of each level up to present day so that we can cross-analyze visually and see the trends a bit easier. Now, full disclosure, I made these graphs at like 12 AM, so a lot of information is going to be off, especially on the levels with near 100 victors. I also want to point out that I counted Spirit X's Anathema completion and Light's Avernus completion in these graphs, even though neither of them have submitted their records to Pointer Crate. The dates used for these graphs were also based on whatever dates the YouTube videos were addressed to, which I know is usually later than the completion date, especially if it's a rewind. But if you want to dig into the rabbit hole and find out the exact dates that I think in 500 victors in this video beat their levels, be my guest, but I am not doing all that. With that being said, the first graphs I made were for Anathema and Spectre. These were some of the more recently verified levels, so there's not really much to say here, but I do think it's important to note that Spectre and Anathema, compared to a lot of other levels in this video, gained many victors pretty quickly. Most of these levels, as you'll notice, seem to stew around 0 to 5 victors for the first 9 months before picking up some traction. Next up is Avernus and Tunnel of Despair. I grouped these two levels together because they both took a lot longer to even just get their first victor. Now, first off, it's important to note that both of these levels went unrated for a time before being placed on the list, and with the reputation these levels had, there was basically zero chance anyone was planning on playing them during that time. Specifically in the case of Tunnel of Despair, it was rated on September 30th, 2023, over 3 months after the original verification. It wasn't until WPompa finally beat it and got it moved up like 10 spots that anyone seemed to really start to care. Though, as you can see, victors definitely started growing in demand when it became a top 10 because, well, fancy top 10, gotta beat it now. Going back to Avernus, it was unrated for a lot less time than Tunnel of Despair, but still took nearly the same amount of time to get its first victor. This was probably for 2 reasons. The first one being the anti-Avernus sentiment that a lot of people were putting out at the time. Since the level was so unpopular with the community, it didn't really make anyone interested in being the first to beat it because it supposedly sucked. The other reason was that Avernus was originally placed at number 2, so on top of being unpopular, if you were good enough to go for the top 2, why wouldn't you just go for the top 1? And that's probably why Acheron has almost 5 times as many victors despite being around the same difficulty. Speaking of the devil, Acheron is our first level here that seems to adhere to the typical curve we see with most of the top 1 levels here, starting out low with just a few victors before slowly gaining more and more popularity among the players and becoming more and more doable. Acheron is kind of a bad example to analyze when looking at the changes in the rate of change, because at its steepest point in the slope, it occurs shortly after players realize that CBF made Acheron quite a bit easier. Going back to Avernus for a bit, I don't know if I can explain this massive increase in victors that happened around December. I guess just a bunch of people became cracked out of nowhere. It doesn't really sync up with any major events other than, I guess, people just wanting to finish off a level before the end of the year. Maybe that was it. Moving on, we have Kyoki. This is our last level that never placed top 1 or was considered top 1 in retrospect. Despite it never having a top spot though, it still maintained a pretty similar curve to the other levels on this list, probably because of its popularity. If you look at the other levels in the top 6 at the time, yeah, it was a no-brainer to go for Kyoki. Like, I can either play Kyoki or Silent Clubstep. This is truly a hard choice. I don't know what I'll go for. I think it's not surprising that most people, when looking for a top level to beat, either chose Acheron because it was top 1, chose Slaughterhouse because it was really influential, or chose Kyoki because it was just actually good. Silent Clubstep has a bit of a weird curve because it's not really a curve. Silent Clubstep has pretty much the most stable growth in victors with no large hikes in popularity at any point. To me, this is probably because it's even more of a pain to beat than anything around it, so hype could never really be quote-unquote high for this level, because at the end of the day, only crazy people really wanted to play it. Another trend I've also noticed with this level is a seemingly complete lack of consistency. A lot of the players who go for it take a very long time and kind of seem to have an unpredictable finish date. I guess over time, the increase in randomness, because of the fact that it's a very kind of strange level in the way that it's balanced and just not a lot of people wanted to beat it in the first place, it ended up having a lot more stable growth. Okay, so starting out with some of our pre-2023 top ones, we have the first one chronologically, which was Firework. Once again, pretty steady line that seems to get steeper close to about a year ago, but one thing off about this trend is that it didn't start out thin and sloping as the others did. There was a lot more initial interest with Firework, getting 4 victors in the first 3 months, more than every other level besides Spectre and Anathema. Of course, the common thread in all these levels is that they're highly anticipated, well decorated for their time, and meant to be enjoyable for top players. So looping back to the original question of this video, if both Firework, Spectre, and Anathema all got the same amount of victors in such a short amount of time, then is it fair to say we have had a huge increase in skill in proportion to difficulty? I actually don't think so, mainly for 2 reasons. The first is that I believe Anathema and Spectre were actually a lot more anticipated than Firework. Sure, all 3 of them were popular, but Anathema and Spectre were in the works for years, and even Firework wasn't considered the best decoration in the world when it came out. Because of the anticipation, there are players who've literally waited years just to play Anathema and Spectre, and I think they both got early influxes of victors due to that. I still see a lot of very talented and capable players struggling with these levels, so I think it's reasonable to assume that victors will start slowing down after all the top few players have beaten them. I could totally be wrong about this, but I just don't see something like Anathema reaching 100 victors in 2 years like Firework was able to do. But by all means, top players, prove me wrong. Next we have Sakupen Circles. I don't really have much to say about SKC that we haven't really covered already. It also seems to adhere to the general top level curve and sees a spike sometime around where CBF became available and made wave gameplay a bit easier. Sakupen Circles also saw a ridiculous amount of jumpers. Do not ask me why anybody would want to just throw themselves at this level for some reason, when their hardest is like Erebus or something, but it seems a lot of these jumpers have finally finished it recently, again probably because of CBF, which also might have contributed to the slope getting steeper. Finally, there's Slaughterhouse, and perhaps unsurprisingly, it has pretty much the smoothest trend of any level here, which makes sense considering its popularity, and the fact that at the time of making this graph we have 98 victors to measure rather than 20 to 50, we just have more data, so the graph looks more stable. I mean, that's just kind of how that works. But I think based on this, Slaughterhouse probably serves as a good benchmark for the increasing skill of players over time, and more people becoming capable of more challenges. Maybe in the future I'll compare Slaughterhouse to previous top ones like Tartarus or Bloodlust, but obviously the farther back you go, the more victors you have to deal with, so yeah, that'll have to wait. The last level I'll mention before comparing this all to our current top 3 is Abyss of Darkness. AOD kind of ended up like a hybrid between Avernus and something like Sakupen Circles. It still shows the same trend as before, but it's a lot more rocky and has a much slower start. Unlike Avernus, people didn't take forever to start beating it, but I think that's because not only is AOD easier, but it was also considered a potential top 1 when interest around such levels was at an all-time high. So despite the fact that, like Avernus, it didn't have a good reputation for gameplay, people were still willing to beat it because, I mean, who could pass up a little Death Note dubstep? I think we could all do with a little more Death Note dubstep in our life. But anyway, let's see whether this information actually all stands out from Tidal Wave. So here you will see the graphs of each level put next to each other, and here's Tidal Wave. Yeah, it's, there's kind of, there's kind of a difference here. Problem is, these levels have all been out for quite some time now, especially Slaughterhouse, Firework. Acheron even has had a lot of time to gain victors, and if we're being completely fair, it's only been 18 months since Tidal Wave's verification, while it's been 40 since Firework's verification. So if we look at the beginning of these graphs, they might not actually be too different, so I decided why not let's compare these instead. And this, I think, gives us a lot more of a good idea about the progression of top ones. We see something like Abyss of Darkness is actually pretty similar to Tidal Wave in terms of its early victors. Sure, it had, 3 more victors during this period, but still at the end of the day, Abyss of Darkness has a very similar curve to Tidal Wave. Problem is, we still haven't gotten another Tidal Wave victor, and Abyss of Darkness, again, already got 3 more by the 16-month mark. So there's still a difference here. All of these other levels, though, as we can see, and you kind of have to pay attention to the scale, like this is going up to a little over 11 victors in 18 months, while Firework is getting almost to 30 in 18 months. So the scales are different, so that's something we should keep in mind. But for the most part, just based on the shapes, outside of Avernus, all of these are, they put Tidal Wave to shame. So I think it is pretty clear, since Avernus was, again, originally a top 2, Abyss of Darkness has never really had a good reputation, people don't really like it that much. All the levels that people have liked, and remember, Tidal Wave is a pretty well-liked level, people generally seem to like the gameplay. it's a liked level, why aren't people beating it? It's really, really, really hard. I think in the next 2 weeks we'll see Amethyst come out, and we'll see what happens there, but I think we're going to see even less victors with Amethyst within the first year, if even any. Like, Zoink might go for it, but I don't think Trick's going to go for it. I don't think Doggy's going to go for it. I really don't see anyone outside of Zoink beating it in, like, the first 6 months. Basically, every other top 1 coming out right now is cooler, but I think it will be an interesting case study to have a top 1 that people just don't really want to beat anymore. I think we're kind of at a point of the community where we're definitely at a top 1 fatigue. Anyway guys, thanks a lot for watching. As I said in the April Fool's video, I have a bunch of ideas and I'm just trying to carve out time to get these videos out to you guys. If you like what you see and you want to support the effort I put into this video, consider subscribing. As always, I appreciate any comments, and I'll read all of them no matter how close to college dissertations they become. So feel free to reach out in the comments and ask questions if you're curious about anything. You can DM me at the Blue Elephant 1 on Discord if you want to have access to any of the data I used in this video. Though, again, be warned, I'm like 99% sure that the older levels are just not fully accurate. But that's okay, we all make mistakes. Anyway, I'm not gonna drag this on. Thanks for watching. Cue super good outro transition.